Hello and welcome to Chaos Dwarf Radio, the Brazen broadcast, a free-to-download legacy podcast not intended for match to play. With me today, I have Reaver.
Hey guys.
Chitzkoi.
Good morning.
And today we have a special guest. Freed from his stone curse and presumably walking around on steam-powered legs, we have CDO's founder and original Sorcerer Prophet, Xander.
How's it going?
It's good to get us all around the microphone. There's lots and lots to talk about. It's been a while since we did one of these. First up, I think we should have a little catch-up. I've been playing quite a bit of the Old World recently. I don't want to get into too much detail because we're going to be going into quite a lot of detail about the Old World soon. But yeah, just started an Old World campaign using the old Mighty Empire tiles. So I've been getting into that. Been rebasing Chaos Warriors, and I've been painting up my extremely large backlog of big hat Chaos Dwarfs. But I've been doing a really good job of keeping the backlog stable by buying just as much as I'm painting. That's the plan.
Nice.
You guys, Reaver, what have you been up to, man?
Not too much in the way of gaming, but been trying to chase through a bunch of basically all war machines. I actually kind of took an inventory. I've got no infantry units left for any of my armies, so I am in paint the big things mode for the foreseeable future, which has been a lot of fun. Timed well with the golden hat, I suppose, so I'll take that. But yeah, other than that, trying to stave off buying things, but it's not going so well.
How you looking in the back, G, Reaver?
Oh, pretty dead even, I would say. I managed to float at like -2 or something like that, but it's slow going painting things that are on monstrous infantry or above, so we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Very good. And Ken, since you've moved to the other side of the world, haven't you, mate? Do you want to talk to us a bit about what you've been up to?
I have indeed. How's it going, everyone? In case you don't hang out in the Discord or pay close attention to my discourse blogs, I have moved to Seoul, South Korea, which is very much Gundam territory. I think we've been able to identify 2 Warhammer stockists nationally. And one of them is a COVID paranoid recluse shut-in who shut down his shop and does online only. However, I was able to get my copy of The Old World and also a copy of Ravening Hordes. But I'm back to the old days of the pandemic. I'm a paper hobbyist again. In the interim, I've been playing a lot of 2nd edition with Jack and the gang. That's 2nd edition 40k, you understand, mostly with squads. But now that I've moved to Korea, obviously I have only got 2 armies coming with me. They won't arrive until April, so I've still got, as of time of recording, about a month before I can do any proper hobbying. But those armies are going to be greenskins for the Old World, which is going to be a bit of a kind of a basing challenge to make sure they're all on appropriate separators. And then I've got my Hashut Iron Warriors project coming soon to a batchy backlog near you, where I'm going to be taking a kind of Warhammer 30,000 Horus Heresy army and using bits from the Horns of Hashut to make a Chaos Cultist group, and also, a bunch of Iron Warriors who worship Hashut.
That's a very cool idea, and I've seen some of your work in progress builds there, man. It's been very, very cool indeed. All right, nice one. And Xander, what have you been up to, mate?
I've been up to so much. I'm just exhilarated with Warhammer The Old World. I had been collecting Dark Elves all fall, just a bunch of kits, because I knew that they were going to sell out immediately when this game dropped. And so by the time it did come out, I just was all set. I made this huge Dark Elf army. I built it in like 5 weeks. It's got a dragon theme. It's got dragon chariots instead of Cold One chariots, and it's been super cool. I've been doing that. I rebased an entire Warriors of Chaos army that I never painted, and now I'm starting a new Chaos Dwarf army. So I'm back. I'm like really back. I've been on the forums. I've been on the Discourse. I've been on the Patreon. I've been everywhere on Chaos Dwarfs Online, just sort of resuming where I left off since Fantasy died, and it's been really awesome.
Really cool. It's really cool, man. I think that's something we're going to see quite a lot of. There'll be some people who kind of moved to alternative games. There'll be some people that kind of like plugged away playing 8th. There'll be some people who kind of like dropped off really, and now they're kind of coming back. And I do think something I've noticed is there's been something of a galvanizing of the community once again, because love it or hate it, Warhammer is the biggest game in town, and if Warhammer's good again, people are going to want to be on it, and that's it's nice that we can once again kind of have a lingua franca on the forum. When you say I'm putting together a Chaos Dwarf list, you don't have to have a preamble of what edition and what system and all that kind of stuff. People know you're talking about Chaos Dwarfs in the old world unless you say otherwise.
Yep, absolutely.
Very good. So let's talk about the old world then, gentlemen, because this is something that I can think back to the early days of this podcast, which I think is pushing about 3 years ago now, where we were first getting those rumblings about the old world. And the kind of the meme and the joke was that it was never coming, it was really, really slow, etc., etc. But we didn't quite realise how accurate that actually was. I don't know if you guys share with me, but I had almost like a level of disbelief about it ever actually coming out. A friend of mine, Luke, who I play a lot of Warhammer with, he hit the nail on the head with me. Even on pre-order day, he said, I've ordered it. And he said, I still don't believe it's going to happen. If the parcel's opened and it's a poster of a Stormcast, give me a middle finger. I'll just say, yeah, fair play, Games Workshop. Great joke. I appreciate it.
Well, it almost didn't happen. I mean, it sold out everywhere. Not everyone got a chance to actually order what they wanted. And even in my case, where I did get a chance to order what I wanted, there was huge shipping delays in the Americas. Like, I didn't see my product for at least 2 weeks till after launch. So it was weird. It was a weird launch.
I think if rumor is to be believed, the whole project has been in development for years and years and years. So they talk about the idea going back to 2018. So less than 2 years into Age of Sigmar, they started talking about this in a serious way, presumably because they could see that everyone was playing square-based games and Mantic was running a square-based business, down the road in Nottingham.
Wasn't the announcement like the week of like Kings of War
Yes.
2 or something?
Yes, there's a
In Kings of War 3, I think, but yeah.
There's a lot of corporate stuff that we think is also behind the fact that legacy PDFs are really high quality, because in the original project they were intended to eventually be army books, and so that's why they've got like proper special rules and lots of effort went into them, because they are old drafts of what would have been additional factions in the supplements. And then Big Daddy GW kind of stepped in and said, you need to limit this project and limit the scope. But then actually demand has massively outstripped supply. And I think, the thing that's so interesting that people have been talking about, Xander, that you mentioned, is that demand has stayed really high in the legacy PDF space. So Dark Elves are a great example. But like you correctly predicted, they all sold out. And, it's obvious that range is intended to be replaced by new AOS sculpts at some point in the new AOS edition. And yet, I hope GW can respond to the very clear commercial information that they should keep making those miniatures and selling them. But it's going to take years for them to digest that information. And we've got to make sure the old world is going well in the meantime, right?
And even before the old world came out, they have all sorts of supply issues on their website. Things are just out of stock for armies everywhere, even in AOS. So it's kind of, people are talking about them maybe spinning up another production site, maybe in America or something, but they just can't manufacture sprues fast enough.
No, they can't. They really, really can't. I mean, even if you were after quite mainstream armies, and quite mainstream games, you click the little tab to say notify me when in stock again, and you can be waiting months and months and months. A buddy of mine had it for one of the undead armies in Age of Sigmar. It might be like Vargulfs or something like that, and he had it in his notify me when in, and it notified him when in. He was at work at the time, and he thought, when I get home from work, I'll make sure I buy a box. And by the time he got home from work, it's sold out again.
Yeah, it gone again.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, I know scalping is a big topic in the community, but I don't think that scalping is hugely going on with old world boxes. One of the things that is interesting, though, is that I have seen some preposterous prices for the Tomb King's launch box on eBay, which is stupid because it's not out of production. And just because it's currently out of stock, like it came back into stock in the UK yesterday, for instance, because I got the notification about it.
I had the magic cards, the cards for the magic and the magic items in my checkout, basket or whatever, and I did not buy them in the end, and I feel a bit silly because they sold out and now they're like crazy expensive. So,
well, one important thing I think for us to remember is that when GW sells out something, they start thinking immediately about how they can sell it again. And I think from that perspective, like there is something to be said for viewing these things in as positive a light as possible. I know that people get very frustrated with the company. No one is more frustrated with the company than a Chaos Dwarf fan. But when you get down to it, ultimately, like the more demand there is, the more supply there will eventually be. Patient war gamers are often war gamers who save themselves hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Xander, have you had a chance to play Old World yet, mate?
Yes. So I've been playing a lot, which is actually kind of a change for me. I'm usually more of a hobbyist, and when this game came out, I wanted very explicitly to be playing the game right from the start. So I was actually collecting up, people who I had actually done a Necromunda campaign with before the pandemic, which was the campaign was ruined by the pandemic. But now that things have settled down, and I knew these guys were into old like fantasy, so we got 3 other guys. We got a solid group of 4 people. We're all building armies. We're all playing games. We're all practicing the rules. We're all talking about lists. And so I've done that. I also went to the first tournament, maybe. I don't know. They were saying when I went there, it was the first like ranked one or whatever. I don't know the actual terminology, but it was in Barrie, Ontario. And I even played against a YouTuber whose name, Scary. That's it. And so I had a really good time there. Played 3 games there, and everyone was just having a blast. It was like the first or second week since the game like launched practically, so it was really cool to see everyone just fumbling through the rules and having a good time, and no one really caring that that miniatures weren't painted or anything, and everyone was just having an awesome time. So I've been playing a lot, and it's been great. And I'm also going to Adepticon next week to play in 2 separate tournaments. So I'll be playing a bunch of games there, and I'll also be playing in a teams tournament. That's the second event that I'm playing in, and I'm playing it with an old Chaos Dwarfs online member, Swiss Dictator. So it's going to be awesome.
And Jack, I mean, that kind of begs the question, right? You've been playing a lot as well. I wonder if you guys, because I think it's fair to say, Jared, Jared and I are in slightly different situations, right? I myself have got the rulebooks next to me, but I need to create a play group. I've got the beginnings of that thanks to Chaos Dwarfs Online, but it's going to be a long road, and I need my minis to get with me, and we need a gaming board and all that kind of stuff. And then, Jared, your perspective on the old world's a bit different, isn't it?
Slightly, I would say. I was just doing a bit of homework on the side, and I would say the last time I purchased a book within a living system was 2004's Lord of the Rings strategy battle game, Siege of Gondor.
So that's 20 years.
That's
20
awesome.
years.
So in the lull between Warhammer Fantasy ending and AOS going, I eventually sort of got over myself, and I said, okay, I'm going to try Age of Sigmar. And the thing that really spurred me to action was the Cities of Sigmar list, which finally put humans in the setting. And I was inspired by Chris Peach's army of humans, and it was really awesome. Like he had, scraped together all the different Warhammer kits that were relevant to that list and made this awesome army. And I thought, okay, I can do the same. And I scrounged my whole collection. I built the Cities of Sigmar list, and the project probably took me about 18 months, which is like a record for me to make a 2,000 point army. And then almost immediately when I was done, I played like 1 or 2 games, and then a brand new battle tome came out, replaced my whole army. The whole army is practically obsolete. They replaced the aesthetic, they replaced the units, and it just goes to show you, like, you've got about a 2-year window with most of these books.
Fuck living systems.
They're just going to get completely replaced.
Fuck living systems.
Mate, I had a very similar experience of Age of Sigmar as well, where I was kind of dragged. I played Age of Sigmar quite a bit upon its early release, but then I was dragged back into it a little while later by a buddy who was saying, like, you will enjoy it. It's not the best system in the world. I know it's not really your cup of tea, but it's about who you play with and how you're playing. And I'm a firm believer in that. Do you know what I mean? If I'm playing noughts and crosses with the right person, I'll have a good time, But it was the fact that I was like, all right, I'm doing Hedonites of Slaanesh. The Hedonites of Slaanesh book has come out. They've got these really cool Slaanesh mortals. I bought them, I based them, I painted them. I even bought the little unit cards and the dice and everything. And then that didn't last 2 years. That was like a year later before they had like a new version of their battle tome.
Yep.
And all of their units had changed, and all those unit cards I got were useless. And I mean, even the battle tome I got, by the time it was printed and was in my hand, there was already FAQs on the internet making the magic less powerful because it apparently had come out and it was really, really broken. Maybe hadn't been play tested very well or something like that. And it was just painful. And this is where I don't understand the argument when I see some people online going, "Oh, the old world's out, but you'll be lucky. You'll be lucky to get a couple of releases a year." I just think to myself, "Oh, I really hope that's true.
Paradise.
I really
Paradise.
hope that's true."
I mean, what a classy way to publish.
Yeah, ruin it slower.
All the army lists on release. All the army lists on release. You know what minis are going to come out. There's no fake hype cycle, right? Because you know what's on the Chaos Dwarfs roster. You know what's on the Greenskins roster. If you're playing a live faction, if you're playing a dead faction, then go on, fuck off, do your hobbying, make what you want, do what you want. What a classy way to run a system. I really believe
that's perfect.
that
It's perfect.
the flaws.
Yeah, and plus on top of that, right? So we've got all the starting army lists. Everyone's on an equal footing. And the way they're going to do it is when we release quote unquote army books, they're not army books, they're supplements. And they just give you more options for your army already. So we've got the Bretonian one, we've got the Tomb Kings one, and they just get additional benefits. It's not replacing anything that came before. It's just, here's some other options you have. And that's amazing.
Little themed armies, special units, special character stuff, that sort of thing, like sprinkling that in. That's really cool. It won't mean that, a Bretonian book comes out and fundamentally changes what Bretonians are. It'll be like, oh, here's a fun way to play with your Bretonian army. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, that's the way to go.
Bretonian Exiles and the Border Princes, that's really cool.
If it takes them 3 years to get through the 7 armies or whatever they've got here, I don't bloody care. That's fine because the product on release is good. The product is good. It works. It's a well play tested, pretty balanced, decent system. And I say pretty balanced because I would not be playing in hyper competitive meta sort of situations. I'd be playing with buddies doing narrative games and stuff, which, wonky systems would potentially ruin fun, but it's a solid enough system that a casual gamer is just going to have a real fun game with it.
Well, I think that's kind of the natural segue. If Jared and I make some space for you and Xander to spurg out about how the game actually works, I just want to add my factoid. Right, there are 253 pages of rules in that rule book, and that doesn't include the faction-specific special rules that you've got to learn if you're playing, especially a heavy special rule faction like an undead faction or demons or something. So it's a huge ask of a lot of gamers. Much of it is familiar, but much of it has been changed. And as we all know with square-based systems, if you change a small thing like initiative or the way that combat resolution works or the choices that players are forced to make in certain situations, then it has a massive impact on the game system, as any historical Warhammer fan who's played multiple editions of fantasy will tell you. From that perspective, do you guys just want to kind of tell us what your early games have felt like, how you made your way through those rules, and what you've noticed about the system compared to the systems that you played in the past?
I think the first thing I would say is that it's Warhammer. Like, no one's reinvented the wheel here. Warhammer is a game that has evolved. It's not had kind of big revolutionary shifts in its journey as a game system. If you think about a game like Warhammer 40,000, for example, Rogue Trader is one game, 2nd edition is another game, 3rd up to 7th is a whole different game, 8th onwards is a new game. That's a game that has had its DNA rewritten many times, whereas Warhammer Fantasy Battles has very much more had incremental changes over time.
Yeah, I think if you look at like the stat line for a human, it's been the exact same almost the entire time, I think.
Absolutely, and I think that's where you pick up this game and you start rolling dice, and very, very quickly you go, well, this is Warhammer, isn't it? I know what I'm doing here. I mean, it does have pitfalls that come with it, because as a person who's played a previous edition, you might go, oh, I know what I'm doing. Oh, fuck, I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm actually accidentally using a rule from 8th or something here, because that's where some of those, as you say, Chits, like some of those nuances have changed, some of the special rules have changed, some of the ways you do things have changed. But that's my big first impression, is that this is Warhammer, and if you like playing Warhammer, you will like playing this,
I think the next thing you notice right away, as soon as you're building your army list, is the model count has been greatly diminished. And I would say even diminished more than 6th edition, where 6th edition, it was very common for us to be running 25 unit strong of Chaos Dwarves. And now, honestly, when I'm building a 2,000 point list, I'm struggling to get to a unit of 20 Chaos Dwarves in one unit. My shooting units are like units of 10. My other units are 15 or 20 maybe. And you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 Chaos Dwarf units only in a list. The model count is way under 100. It's probably closer to like 60 or something. And when you compare that with what 8th edition was doing to the game and driving model counts such that, units of Night Goblins were 100 models, of themselves. I think this is really positive. I really was hoping that this was going to be the case where building a 2,000 point army was an affordable enterprise where you could encourage people to get into the game. And with, where the prices are, especially for Games Workshop models, the 8th edition model was just completely unsustainable in light of those prices. So I'm really happy to see the model count drop.
Yeah. And I think the depressing thing you've always got to remember about 8th edition is that the writers of the game went into it knowing that it was going to be a final edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. It was during the end of 7th they knew that this was going to be its swan song, as it were. And there is a bit of a thing with 8th of it was a game to go mental with and smash together as many models as possible, and everything got very high fantasy and very crazy and stuff towards the end. Whereas I think this thing's, has brought us back down to earth a little bit. I find where I run, obviously, Chaos Dwarfs, but an army that I run more often than Chaos Dwarfs is Chaos Warriors. And what I have found is that they very, very much more feel like tough humans as opposed to gods and supermen. They felt like an 8th.
Yeah, certainly for regular Chaos Warriors, people are saying, well, regular Chaos Warriors aren't really the Chaos Warriors we used to know. They're more like what you said, really tough guys, but it's really the Chosen that are now the new Chaos Warrior.
Absolutely, the Chosen handle just like Chaos Warriors did in 8th, but it's quite nice now that you have that distinction and you can kind of make those choices about these are the blokes who are on the cusp of becoming a Chaos Lord almost, and these are the guys who, I don't know, they've just got their suit of armour and they've just walked out of Norska ready to split some heads. They're two very different people. But yeah, I've enjoyed the game a lot. I think there's some cool things about the game that I've liked. I like the way that combat's move. I like the giving ground and the falling back in good order. I don't know how you feel about that, Xander.
Yeah, I think it's something new to grapple with. But in general, I find it good. I mean, I've always felt that, you charge a unit, you do like 5 casualties in the front rank in prior editions when you couldn't strike back. This is pre-8th. And you didn't get to attack back. You lost combat. You fled. They trampled you over. It felt bad, when you just painted up 20 goblins or something and you never even got a chance to do anything with them. They just got run over completely. So I think this is bringing a measure of ebb and flow to the combat where it's like,
Definitely.
Yeah, they charged. Maybe they killed a bunch of goblins, but your whole unit didn't just fall apart. You fell back a bit, which kind of makes sense. They're pushing you back, your unit's falling back. And that's going to have ramifications. Now your line is open to flank charges and other things, and it's got an impact on the game. But you didn't lose your whole unit in one shot.
Yeah, definitely. And being a fan of kind of ancient history and stuff like that, when you read the reports of those ancient battles, it was that push and shove and to and fro of blocks of infantry that. And I know Warhammer's always been a bit silly, really, because you have 10 or 20 men walking around as a unit of 500 men might have walked around in ancient times. In real life, 10 or 20 men don't go, right, boys, we have to stand in the exact square block now. Don't you dare put one step out. So it's a little bit silly in that respect. But it does, I think, now better simulate that kind of pushing and shoving. And as you say, Xander, your lines kind of changing, and that way the landscape of the battlefield can suddenly look quite different to what it did a turn before and open up new tactical opportunities, but also open you up to outflanks and things like that. How do you feel about the new magic? Because that's quite a departure from 8th, isn't it?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I played too much 8th edition. I think I have the rules. I think I read them. I heard a lot about, the Purple Sun just destroying everything.
Oh, goodness me, yeah.
And, so I'm happy that it's toned down. Magic has always felt like a separate game inside the game, and I know some people think that's enjoyable and that's fun. But it always felt like whenever I was playing a new edition of Warhammer, it's like, how does the magic work in this one? Because everything else kind of remained the same, but magic was always something totally different from edition to edition. And this one it sort of incorporated into the game a little more, and it feels more natural in the sense that, okay, if you're going to be doing movement spells, you're doing it in the movement phase, and that's going to help you in the movement phase. If you're doing shooting, you're going to shoot your magic missile in the shooting phase. And if you're doing a combat spell, you're going to do that in the combat phase. And it kind of makes sense, although I must admit that I've been forgetting to, like, I think everyone has, you're moving phases and you're switching and you're like, oh crap, I didn't do my buff spell or my hex spell.
Yeah,
that, and they're like, yeah, it's fine, let's do that, because everyone wants that second chance when we're learning the rules. But it's taking some getting used to, but I think overall, I think it's a benefit. I think there's some talk that a level 4 in a 2,000 point game is like it's necessary. That extra +4 to casting rolls and dispel rolls is really important. So it's interesting, but there's also this interesting element where it's you have to be in range, 18 inches for smaller mages and 24 for level 3-4 mages. And also, I mean, you can just straight up charge into combat with something that's flying or whatever, some of these mages, and you can kind of take them offline. So there's a lot of ways to interact with magic in ways that you couldn't before. Using melee, using tactics. You can, like, so for example, I was playing in this game, and I had a Supreme Sorceress on a Dark Pegasus. My opponent was Orcs and Goblins. They cast like the Foot of Mork. They put it like right in front of my Cold Ones and also my Sorcerer. And I managed not to dispel it. And then on my turn, when it scattered into my Sorceress and completely obliterated my level 4 Sorceress in one shot. He got some good rolls. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? Like, am I just totally screwed? I have no level 4 mage and he's got a level 4 wizard. And what I did was I charged his wizard with my dragon that turn. And I kind of took his magic offline and started beating on the unit that it was in. And it was okay. It turned out there was a strategy left for me to employ, even though my level 4 had been destroyed. So I think there's a lot of interesting avenues to explore when it comes to magic and how it works. And,
yes, certainly. I think that whole thing you were talking about there, when a wizard's in hand-to-hand combat, they are not able to do an awful lot. That they still be able, if they have some assailment spells or something. No, that's better to get those off. You
can't dispel and you can't cast unless it's a combat spell, right?
There's so much you can't do. But something I never used in 8th edition, but I'm finding myself using a little bit more now, is the spellcaster not attached to a unit. I've got 2 blocks of Chaos Warriors running around, and in between them is a little lone sorcerer chucking out fireballs and stuff, And that's got a place now, because if he's in a big block of Chaos Warriors, that Chaos Warriors, every moment that they are not punching someone is a moment wasted. But if that wizard's in there punching someone, he's being wasted. And I've surprised myself really at running that. And I find it quite aesthetically pleasing, because to me it looks like the old White Dwarf pictures. They'd always have the heroes separate out of the units, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I think there's and I appreciate I'm coming at this from a paper hammer perspective, right? I haven't played with some of these things, but I think that magic, it looks like a tool in the toolkit that you need to have. You should have an answer for it if your opponent brings it. The thing that I think is interesting as a design choice that has changed things significantly is the random generation of spells. Especially given that you don't have to take randomly generated spells, because you can substitute them for a choice out of your kind of faction lore if you decide to. A signature spell, exactly. And I just wanted to kind of put that on the table for you guys and question it. Like, what do you guys think about that? Because given how powerful some spells are,
I think it's good. I think, when you think of a wizard, you think of someone casting a spell on an enemy unit and causing damage, right? It's kind of like a shooting unit. And it could very easily happen in past editions where you have a level 2 or something, and you roll some spells, and you get these spells that are just really not applicable to the opponent you're playing or the strategy that you have, and you're sort of, that's it. There's bad luck for you, I guess. And by having these signature spells that all really seem to be kind of like magic missiles, more or less, it really allows you to default to these spells, and it's nice. And it's only one spell, honestly. And the random generation spell, the random generation of spells in particular, I don't think it's that big a deal, especially if it's 4 spells. You always have the option to take, was it a lore familiar, where you can choose your spells. You can spend those points if you really want to and have the exact choice. Or if you're in like chaos or something, you can take a familiar, magic item where you get an extra spell. So you have 5 out of 6, which, I mean, that's pretty close in games where I've been playing with that setup. I just roll a dice to see which spell I don't have, really, because there's only 6 to choose. So it's a lot faster to do it that way.
Yeah, and when in doubt, my favourite item in the entire book, the Ruby Ring of Ruin. You guarantee at least get a fireball off.
Listen, one of the challenges I think with a system this large and complicated is that I think a lot of players look for a crutch, and I think the first crutch that most people have been looking for is like a net list. So if I talk about what we've observed on CDO since the Old World launched, we've had a big uptick in threads and posts of people asking questions like, what is the best formation to put my Infernal Guard in? And they're asking that question because they're coming from systems where there is an objective correct answer to that question, and you have to stack the buffs. And so they want to know, what's the shape of regiment that stacks the most buffs so that I win? And hopefully there will not be a correct answer to that question, because it will be so contextual based on who you're facing and what terrain you're dealing with and what the tactical situation is for you as a general. And so that's what we've been saying to people. But I think that impulse to try and solve for what are the best magic items per point, unfortunately, over time, when a meta develops, there are going to be auto includes. And I think the first auto include that's worth observing that I've seen on CDO is the Lamasu's Beard standard. Everyone takes the Lamasu's Beard standard in the lists that I've seen and people have talked about on their battle standard bearer. And I think many magic items, Ruby Ring of Ruin is one that people talk about all the time, because why would you not want to be able to cast a fireball? You know what I mean? It's just an automatically good thing.
You want to say what that banner does? I'm actually not familiar with it. The Chaos Dwarf list I've built actually don't have battle standard bearers yet. Okay. So I'm interested.
Here's Lamasu's Beard, guys. A unit carrying the Lamasu's Beard has a 6+ ward save against any wounds suffered, and gains the magic resistance -2 special rule. In addition, whilst within 6 inches of a model carrying this standard, friendly units have a 5+ save against any wounds suffered during the shooting phase and gain magic resistance -1. So what you have here is a bubble of a bubble of 5+ ward saves in the shooting phase, a little bit of magic resistance, and if somebody gets all up in your shit, you've still got a 6+ ward save. So it's not to be sniffed at, is it? It's quite a nice defensive banner, and Chaos Dwarfs often, the kind of Chaos Dwarf army I've ran in the past has been quite a castly sort of list. I feel like there's a place for that for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think listening to that just now, I'm building my Adepticon list, and I'm thinking,
yeah.
If I'm going to be doing sort of gunline artillery strategy, which I think is what I'm aiming towards, it makes a lot of sense to have stuff that's good in the shooting phase where you can just sit back, shoot your artillery. I've got a Demon Smith making sure my artillery rolls are all good and everything's good. And just that little bit extra to protect your Chaos Dwarves, which are huge points investment. They're really, if 15 to 20, dwarves, it's like, it pushes past 300 points really fast. And that's a lot of points for a single unit. So getting that kind of shooting protection is kind of nice.
No, absolutely. And I think, 65 points. So it's not a massive investment for an army. And I do think it's going to be one that you're going to see quite a lot. And I'm really, really pleased because one of my battle standard bearers is the one that I got from Admiral's store, Admiral in Miniatures on Etsy. And it's one of Fugit Khan's miniatures. And I painted it with a giant cartoon beard on it using the Admiral Miniatures logo. So to me, just it already feels like the Lamasu's Beard is a good fit for that flag. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. I would just say one last thing, which is at 65 points, is actually the most expensive Chaos Dwarf specific magic item. Although part of me thinks
Right.
it's been priced like that specifically so that you have to take it on your BSB, because any normal regiment has a points limit for magic standards,
Yes,
whereas
yeah.
the BSB obviously doesn't. But at the same time, it makes sense, because think about if you face anything with the word elf in it, if you face Empire, right, you have expensive guys who need to survive the shooting phase. And if the opponent is planning to major on the shooting phase, then you want that ward save on your most valuable guys. That's just natural.
Yeah. That's 1/3 less of them dying to shooting than would have been previously, and that's well worth having. I think that's a great take.
But yeah, just to finish
Yep.
the wider point, right? I think over time people are going to iterate the lists. I think Chaos Dwarfs Online is going to be the place that people come to talk about this book in particular for very obvious reasons. But at the same time, like, we're trying to keep it away from, like, there is one thread looking to create a hyper competitive list, but I think in reality, you simply, the system is so complicated, and the way that terrain and line of sight works is so absolute that I think there's a lot of rules designed to prevent you from making an objectively good Banner of the World Dragon style net list. So I think just get creative with it would be my advice to people.
I think you're right. I've been looking at some tournament lists that won tournaments, and you look at them and it's like, this is no different from any list that I've designed, really. It's just a bunch of units, it's a bunch of characters, and more or less people are using the same magic items. People are pretty, smart about which ones to pick. And I think it's honestly coming down to generalship, which is really encouraging. Like, these lists don't look crazy. It doesn't look like they have some secret tech that they're employing that you're not seeing. They really just look very normal and ordinary, which is good.
And and Warhammer Fantasy Battles has never been a great tournament game. Anyway, it's never. It's a too much of a. It's too gritty. There's too much going on. There's too much nuance. Age of Sigmar, not my favorite game in the world, but it's a better tournament game. Because
don't tell them that though.
But it's written in that way that it has no soul. It is a game. It's all about whether things are wholly within 5 inches and all that kind of stuff. And it's all about, it's basically, it's Games Workshop's take on War Machine and Hordes, isn't it? It's a game of bubbles with buffs and debuffs and stacking special abilities and heroes with all this. It's a very, very different system. And I think it lends itself almost in the same way that like a card playing game does. I think in many ways Age of Sigmar is a much more gamey game, a gamer's game. It's a game that can be exploited, and in fact it's designed to be exploited. It's designed for getting that battle tome, working out the nastiest combo of buffs and debuffs and making sure that you smash someone's face in. Whereas I think Warhammer Fantasy Battles at its core, or the Old World now at its core, is a game that is a tabletop battle simulator, and I think that's where it really, really shines. And you can have tournaments of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but I think it really, really shines between people playing narrative games, people playing fun games, people using their little toy miniatures to tell a story.
Well, and maybe just to underline that point, right, when we surveyed the CDO community, 4 out of 5 players are going to play in casual settings. But less than 1 in 5 players intends to play in formal settings. Now, that doesn't mean that either of those groups are invalid. But I think it's important to remember that most people are making their way through 253 pages of rules with their friends, intending to have fun.
And I think, Ken, this is the thing that we have to realise online generally, is that the competitive crowd are a very vocal minority in war.
Well, they have a lot to talk about. They have a lot of complex decisions to make.
Exactly that. Whereas the casual gamer is less likely to start a YouTube channel going into deep dives on the rules and all that kind of stuff, because they're a casual gamer. The very nature of them makes them casual. But they are a much more represented group, but probably not represented online as much.
It's a funny thing too, right? Because honestly, this tournament that I just talked about was the first tournament that I went to in my life for Warhammer. So, but prior to that, even when I wasn't going to any tournaments and I really was playing casual just with friends or pick up games at stores, even though I'm not a super big gamer, I think people still want to build their list with the the army list in mind. Select models that are strong and have at least a concept in their head that I'm building a strong army that that can compete on the battlefield. Even if you're just a hobbyist, I feel like that's still a core tenet of how you go about the Warhammer experience. You look at the list, you build the list. A lot of people will buy these army books and never play a game, but they're using it as a sort of formal structure or skeleton for the building process of their army.
Yeah, and it's something that they spend a lot of money on. And so, I have a lot of empathy for it. I think you don't want to find yourself pantsless in that way that I think some of the AOS and modern 40k things have made people scared that it's possible to spend, up to $1,000 on an army list that next year turns out to have been a waste of money, right? Fundamentally, an army list that gives you a negative play experience because you don't get to interact with the other guy because he just shoots you off the table or whatever. That said, there is probably no play style more casual for the old world than not playing it. And Jared, I just wondered, Reaver, if you wanted to kind of weigh in on what it is that kind of is keeping you on the sidelines, because God knows you've got some big square-based armies, right? But I'm just curious, what systems are you going to be using them for, and how are you feeling about Tau? What made you into the titular Brian this time around?
So I think firstly, I am very excited for what this is bringing to the forum. I think that we've had the rising tides raise all ships thing for a long time. Any new system is going to bring us traffic, and ultimately all I want is more showcase blogs on the forum. So that'll be achieved regardless, which I think is really great news. We're bringing a lot of attention to the forum in a lot of good ways, especially recently. So that's incredibly positive. As far as gaming goes, I don't really have a reliable way to get games in. If I were to get games in, it's going to be something along the lines of Mordheim or Battlefleet Gothic or Man of War, I would say, as soon as I get Man of War painted. It's more my speed in general. I don't really have anything local. Transporting even a smaller army for the old world is probably just not something I'm going to do. So that's most of it. I'd say most of my older gaming buddies are all pretty stuck in a good way. Very committed to some of those older systems. So we tend to lean towards that and build for it. My Chaos Dwarfs are very much a hobby project for me. They've not seen a table, admittedly, which I'm very okay with. Definitely been more of the hobby hero style for quite a while. So doesn't really bother me in any way. And if I were to play the old world, I would only play with somebody who didn't require me to rebase or and to be honest, as some people know, I put my models on 22.5 millimeter bases, so they don't fit in any system anyway. But I would only be playing in a casual setting regardless.
That's so punk rock. That is so punk rock, Reaver. Just like, fuck your old system, fuck your new system.
You could still pretty easily actually make movement tray spacers using 3D printing technology.
Yeah, I mean, I have a printer, but I'm not doing it, frankly.
But I mean, it was nice. It was nice to see GW openly saying, guys, if you're playing in a casual setting, who gives a shit about base sizes? And they said that on Warhammer Community, right, through an official channel, because they're trying to encourage people to not completely lose their shit over like something that is very marginal, right? But I think, across the board, one of the things that interests me, and just one last point I wanted to make about the rules. The old world is a big, unwieldy system that will take a large community a long time to figure out the nuances of, right? People you're playing with are going to make mistakes because the mental load of the system is very high. But Warhammer Armies projects, the Ninth Age, even Clow, these are not systems that are going to go away because of the old world, because these are systems that have faster updates and community control that mean that you can be on a Discord server talking to the guy who writes the rules and telling him how what he's done is unbalanced. Tau is never going to have that. It is going to need a community edition to fix it in the way that old systems had before it could be that performant. And from that perspective, I would advise people to just like play it to have fun and don't do any of the dumb stuff you hear about on the internet, because the truth is that like the old world is not going to get balance changes. So if you discover something unbalanced, just don't be a dick about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a massive thing. I mean, the meme that was going around from Dr. Blackseal for a time, wasn't it? Was the Linehammer thing, and it's like, one, I think there's quite a few answers to Linehammer, but two, if you found out there's a way to play the game that looks really, really shit and ruins everybody's fun, probably don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a case of you're going to play one game against someone, and guess what? They're not going to want to play against you anymore. That's not a way to make friends. I love Dr. Luke's videos. I've been watching all of them. He dropped one today, in fact, about Stillmania, Nigel Stillman's sort of rules for making an army and functioning in the wargaming space.
Yeah. Free codes of gloss. Never touch it again. Yeah,
and it's a really cool subject if you want to look it up.
Yeah, I love it.
I think the point that Reaver also made that we haven't really talked about yet was base size increases. How does everyone feel about base size increases? I know for myself, aesthetically, when I've built essentially 2 full armies in the new base size, and I really, really like it. I love having 25 millimeters to base my guys. It's been so awesome. The shift from my Chaos Warriors from 25s to 30s also felt really good. The cavalry, 25 by 50. They say 25 by 50, but it's actually like 23 by 50.
Oh, that's Games Workshop bases are a nightmare for that, aren't they? Yeah.
But now that they're on 30 by 60, it's really nice. There's lots of space, and aesthetically, I'm really liking it. I think maybe the only things that maybe could have remained on 20s were something like Night Goblins or Noblars.
Night Goblins come up a lot.
But I really like everything else. Universally, I think the space is so much better. I think it just allows you so much more creative freedom when you're making your miniatures, and if you're a Chaos Dwarfs fan.
Yeah, I think Night Goblins are the ones that are most regularly referenced, because those Battle for Skull Pass goblins that have been doing the rounds now since the start of the CDO days.
They're very.
Yeah, they are very, very small. They're much smaller than their 6th edition counterparts, and
honestly, I have a bunch of 6th edition ones. I probably have 250 Night Goblins.
Yeah, but they were always a nightmare to do on 20s, weren't they? I mean, actually, talking of that, you're a fan of the old big-hatted Chaos Dwarfs as well. They are a bloody nightmare to get onto 20s.
They never fit. In 1994, 20 mils was too small for them.
Yeah.
You know how you used to have the slot of base where, there's the crease or the hole in the base. It's on one side more than the other. So what you would end up doing is you would have one rank of guys on the left side, and then you'd flip the base around and have the other set of guys on the right side, and you could kind of stagger
you had to
together.
do it.
But it was always a mess, and it barely worked. Or everyone's just standing on a complete diagonal, right, on the other kind of slot of base.
I think I've really enjoyed being able to have big hat Chaos Dwarfs just standing facing forward. They don't all have to be stood at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah. I think we can all see why they made the change. It was sensible.
Have you guys rebased much?
No, and I'm not going to.
Oxy, have you done any rebasing of your guys?
So I went. This was kind of just before your triumphant return to the forum, Xander. There were like stages of mourning and acceptance for me around the old world, where I was the guy on the forum going, "I'm not playing a living game. Call me Reaver, if you will." And and then I went, all right, maybe I will use my old armies in it, but I'm not doing anything new. And then I went straight to, oh my god, this is the best thing that's ever happened. I'm buying new miniatures and I'm rebasing all my armies. So I've been through lots and lots of stages with this. So I don't think you have to rebase. I really don't, especially if you're playing in settings like I'm playing. I did play a couple of games with my Chaos Warriors before they were rebased, and it made marginal differences to the games. They might have been slightly better at some things and slightly worse at other things. I've now rebased my Chaos Warriors, and I've been rebasing my Big Hat Chaos Dwarfs. But my Big Hat Chaos Dwarfs, you have to understand, run circles to begin with. My 1980s style Chaos Dwarfs run 20mm squares, and they're staying on 20mm squares. It's a massive project, and I think that project might be done now. It's a decent 2,500 point army and I'm quite happy with that project, as it were. Who knows? I might come back to it one day, but
Yeah, I took a very interesting and sort of similar trajectory to you with respect to the game coming out. I thought, oh, I'll start a new army, and all my new armies I'll base on the new base sizes, so Dark Elves. And I always planned to do my Warriors of Chaos for whatever new game came out. So I did those two. And then for my existing Chaos Dwarves, I took a sort of a different strategy. I said, I'm not going to rebase any of my infantry. All the stuff on 20 mils, that's fine. I'll make movement trace basers, and that'll be good. And the stuff that's not on 20 mil bases, so all the monsters or the artillery, those have never really had a coherent base size to begin
Yeah.
with. Death. So I updated all my monsters and all my war machines for my army that I'm going to take to Adepticon, but then I've got spacers for the infantry. So that's the sort of halfway that I've gone for my old army for Chaos Dwarfs, and I think it's working for me, and I'm pretty.
My orcs are on spacers, so I started an orc project where I was taking Age of Sigmar Crawl Boy orcs from the Dominion box, kind of Lord of the Ringsy looking orcs, and I was turning them into a fantasy army. And I'd started to that project maybe about 6 or 7 months before the Old World, and where I'd invested quite a bit of time to building and started painting and stuff, I thought, no, you're not getting rebased because you're halfway through. I was quite happy to go back and rebase an old army. I was quite happy to rebase, to start a new army on new bases. But a project I was halfway through, it just felt like taking too many steps backwards.
There is something cathartic and weird and sort of, it's like a rite of passage to rebase an entire army for some Games Workshop product. There's something strange about it. It always seems to happen no matter what game you're playing. Everything gets changed. Like whether it's moving from 5th edition fantasy to 6th, where everyone decided that goblin green bases were out and dirt brown bases were in, and you'd had to repaint everything. There's always something that's going on at a meta level where everyone's deciding something and everyone has to sort of just follow suit. It's really
Tell you what I do like about rebasing. I found this with my Chaos Warriors army, is that it allowed me to maybe make their bases a bit more coherent and better than I'd done them the first time round, where that was an army that had grown really slowly. It started as an Age of Sigmar army, then became an 8th Ed fantasy army, and my painting developed quite a bit during my time painting them. So there's variety in the models in terms of their quality, but their actual bases themselves, there are some bases that were a bit ropey. Like they're based on snow, right? And I think when I first done it, I was like, they're in the snow, so their base will be snow. But then you do that, and it just looks like they're standing on a white platform. Whereas, as time's gone on, my mate John talks to me a lot about always have 3 colours on a base. So if you're going to have snow on the rocks with maybe the odd little flower popping up or something, and it just makes it pop a little bit more, So now that I've rebased them, I think they look like a more coherent and higher quality army.
Nice.
So you conveniently left out your arc, Jack, of when you went into learning an entirely new software on the computer to do custom movement trays. You forgot that little tidbit of your progression through the old world.
Yeah, Reaver, I've had so many weird phases in my life, I can't remember them all.
For those unaware, we have a great tutorial on Chaos Dwarfs Online for making your own custom movement trays with free software. Just DM me if you need any help.
Yeah.
It's the way to go. And absolutely.
The funniest thing about it, Reaver, is I wouldn't know how to do it now. I'd have to read that tutorial again. That was like a mad weekend.
That's why you make the tutorial, though.
Yeah. Well, a lot of Reaver's tutorials are ones I keep going back to. Lava bases being one of them. I think I said this on the forum, Reaver. I'm gonna do a lava base tutorial of my own soon, because I started by trying to emulate yours years ago, but I've kind of slowly created my own version of it, which is I think I'll be able to share. As always with my tutorials, Reaver, it will take half the time of yours and look half as good, but people might still like it.
It's better than taking double the time and looking half as good.
Exactly that. I'm quite content with being quicker and worse. It'd be worse if I was slower and worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's it's great that we've got this old world game, but quite a lot of people are going to be coming back into the hobby or joining the hobby for the first time. And Xander, you've come up with a kind of new initiative in Chaos Dwarfs Online. This is the hashtag Darkforged that you've been working on. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about this project?
Absolutely. So I just feel like, I can't be the only one who's really excited that Warhammer's back. And one of the things that I sort of noted as soon as the launch happened was that, hey, there's a lot of legacy factions here. And, whereas we used to be kind of like the only legacy faction that was kind of around, and we were kind of like the ugly stepchild or something. But now, I mean, we're in the same company as Dark Elves, Ogres, Skaven. Like, these are huge mainstays. And we're now on the same level as all of these other armies. And we're just one option among many. And really the only thing preventing people from starting Chaos Dwarf armies is the miniatures, which means there's a huge opportunity for our community to really rally behind, our army as a concept and make it easily available to everyone, to have all these resources, whether it's third-party miniatures or printable resin 3D sculpts. There's just so much opportunity for our community to come together and encourage and provide just the resources for everyone who wants to make a Chaos Dwarf army to make one. And so this campaign that I'm spearheading, Darkforged 2024, is really to make that easier, or at least provide motivation for people to start a Chaos Dwarf army, to say, hey, look, you're not alone. There's tons of people doing this. It's not as hard as it looks. And so really the way I've broken down the project is, the goal would be to build an old world army in 2024. And the way we're going to approach that is you take it month by month, you choose a unit, and you complete the unit from start to finish inside that month. And for each step that you finish, that's a little check mark off on a box where that'll get you like a raffle ticket to some prize draws that we'll be doing. And really, it's just to provide a sort of a framework. So, in March, we'll focus on core units, and whether that's a single core unit, or if you want to do more, you could. You want to do the assembly portion. So if you assemble a whole core choice, boom, that's one checkbox off, and that's one raffle ticket for possible prizes. If you manage to paint that whole unit, boom, that's another check mark, and another raffle ticket essentially. The other categories we have to finish are basing or movement tray. Writing up some lore for the unit that you've created, playing a battle that maybe incorporates that unit, a battle per month seems feasible. And then we also have a bonus category where there's all sorts of things you could be doing to encourage people in the game or in your army. So we've got things like introduce someone to the game. That could be your bonus for the month. Or build and paint a piece of terrain, that maybe is Chaos Dwarf themed. Or try out a new painting technique, post a battle report on the forum or the Discord or something. Build and paint a unit filler, host or take part in an event, convince a friend to join the forum, something like this. We have a whole list of bonus challenges. And one of the other things you can do is, maybe you have an existing Chaos Dwarf army. You're not building one from scratch, so you feel like you can't participate possibly. Well, the idea is, if you've already assembled and painted your unit, but you really want to have play the old world, you have to rebase it still, or come up with some new lore. You still have to play a game or do the bonus. But if you've already done the assembly step and the painting step, well, you can swap those out for another bonus for that month, so that you could essentially get the same number of raffle tickets as anyone else who's assembling a new army. So we're trying to keep it nice and fair and balanced, and really it's just about motivating people to engage with the community, to build, to paint, and to play the game, and to really enjoy all the different facets of what make our hobby really fun. And I just feel like with the launch of the new game, it just made sense to have a campaign that we can point to and say, hey, we're doing something over here, and we think you should be a part of it. And you're going to get so many benefits. The community, the resources, everything that we've been doing since 2007 is going to be available to you. And I think it's just this huge opportunity. So, I created a brand new website for the community with a campaign page and everything. So I'm really focused on sort of the branding of Chaos Dwarfs Online and where we can take this now that we've got like a solid game that we can all participate in. And so that's my pitch for this campaign, Darkforged. And I've got, we're trying to incorporate social media into it too. So it's like hashtag Darkforged 2024. And a bit about the name. I feel like there's this cool new word that they've been using as a keyword, right? It's Darkforged weapons and Darkforged armor stuff. And it just seems to have this really cool, like it really matches with the lore, I think, of the army. There were these evil forge masters. And I think it was just a cool little word that I could play off and engage with the whole community with.
Absolutely, and it's something I've been getting involved in. In fact, as we are literally talking now, Xander, I'm putting the finishing touches on my March Core unit, which is a unit of 10 Chaos Dwarf blunderbusses.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm currently actually moved on to the movement tray because in my head they will not be complete until the movement tray is also painted. I'm quite a firm believer in that these days. It's something I've moved over to.
Yeah, and that is part of it, right? Like there's this whole gamut, and that's why we kind of had to have these stages that you can complete optionally or not. But like basing or the movement tray, that's a big part of what makes a Warhammer unit look like a Warhammer unit. So
Totally.
I feel like a unit is never complete until it's got that settled.
There's two big benefits to Darkforged, right? One is it will help motivate people, which is the same thing with Batchy and all the other kind of things that we do year round. To understand what it is to post on CDO and to get experience getting compliments in a positive hobby community, and then maybe to kind of for people to try their hand at starting their own blog. And I think blogs are really where the site shines because people engage in their own, mixed process of painting and kit bashing and getting ideas and getting feedback just on an ongoing basis. And then I think the other advantage to it is that what we're kind of going to see is a huge showcase of all the different places you can get Chaos Dwarf models now. Since GW are continuing to abstain from selling them to people for money, and I think we all know that a made to order would sell out in a heartbeat, but I'd rather they not do that because we've got tons of really great third-party alternatives. And having initiatives like this will get people to showcase just a really wide variety so that people understand how realistic it is to collect their own Chaos Dwarfs in the aesthetic that they like. So, Jack, I was taking a look at your whips for those blunderbusses. And they're kind of a mix of 3D prints, aren't they?
Yeah. I'll be talking about these a little bit later on, but yeah, they are all what I would describe as like classic big hat miniatures, but they're not all classic miniatures. We've got some old models with some modern models and some obscure models, but they're all of that aesthetic.
Right, and
I guess I should also mention that this is a long project, right? Building an army is a long project. So we've broken it into months. And so for each of the months, there's a theme, right? So for March, it's going to be core. April, it's going to be heroes. May, special. June, rare. July, war machine. And then August, monster or centerpiece or something like that. And by having this structure, we're really trying to encourage the assembly of a complete army, as I said. And another sort of bonus thing that we're going to maybe try to tack on to the end, it's a bit unplanned for now, but right around the fall is when Games Workshop has its big Armies on Parade celebration. So we're encouraging anyone who's got an official GW model army, or at least some portion of their army that is official. That maybe in September we'll talk about doing the 2x2 2-foot by 2-foot army display boards. And really try to get as many armies as we can to contribute to Armies on Parade for Chaos Dwarfs, to try to send this signal to Games Workshop that, hey, people are playing Chaos Dwarfs in a big way. It's still a huge thing. And so this is the first year that Armies on Parade is going to feature the Old World. So if we make some kind of push in that direction, that could also be really cool for the community.
Sweet. And I guess one thing that we actually didn't discuss, weirdly enough, is the things that have come back into the Chaos Dwarf roster as of this army list that weren't in the Chaos Dwarf roster back in 8th edition. And that does include old classics from the 90s, right? Like, it was extremely respectful, I think, of GW to put Sneaky Gits in there, which were not in Tamakan.
Yeah.
But Black Orcs in there, which again were not in Tamakan. Because the only book they can have been reading to motivate them to do that is obviously the 1994 White Dwarf Presents Warhammer Armies Chaos Dwarfs, which means they've been thinking about big hats. And we know that Creative Assembly have been kind of part of that dialogue with them. And so they will have kind of inspired them to reassess that range and take it a bit more seriously. But I think that means there's a lot of depth and breadth to the project because there are so many different things in core beyond Infernal Guard. And I think the other thing that's nice is that in the PDF lore, GW have reopened the way to say that Infernal Guard don't have to be wearing a tin hat. Do you know what I mean? They can be wearing a big hat. And that means the aesthetic choice is all there for people, right? If you want to make it look entirely 90s, that's legit. If you want to make it look entirely Tamarkan, that's legit. There's nothing stopping you on either front.
Yeah, I think we haven't talked. You're right. We didn't really give our sort of analysis or review of the Chaos Dwarf list itself. And I think, like you're saying, I think it's a perfect synthesis. It's sort of like what we saw with Total War, 3 Warhammer, where they've got this really cohesive vision of what Chaos Dwarfs can be. It's not just Infernal Guard, but it's also Chaos Dwarfs warriors with hats. And now, yeah, like you said, we got greenskins back. We got Hobgoblin bolt throwers. We got everything you could need. Like you could even make a mostly Hobgoblin army, which is kind of rad.
Yeah, you almost can legally. And with a push in a friendly game, you absolutely could do a Hobgoblin army. Legally, I think you need to have some Infernal Guard in there. But yeah, I think if you're playing around your buddy's shed, absolutely you can make an. You can make
also just build some tough looking Hobgoblins and take them with the Infernal Guard staff.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly right. You have some heavily armored Hobgoblins.
There you go.
And perfect. Yeah, counts as. That's your friend.
Oh, but guys, they've got base strength 4 on the Infernal Guard. There's no basic Chaos Dwarf warriors.
Sure, they're just called crewmen now. They've got strength 3. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility with the list. I think it's really awesome. I think we're going to see a lot of cool lists and just cool armies that people build as a result of having access to all these different unit types. I think there's that one thing, this one caveat. You were talking about how it's great that we're including all these units, and there's an eye towards previous editions. The one thing that seems sort of left out of that is the Earthshaker in terms of its base size. There's no included base size for the what's it called? The new one.
The Dreadquake, which is just a giant Earthshaker, isn't it, from Tamarkan?
Dreadquake mortar, right?
Yeah.
And it's on this giant train, and if you actually look at the footprint of that giant
it's like
model,
the biggest base size in.
It's so
big.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, the minimum base size you could probably squeeze into it is something like 40 by. I don't even know. It's like 100.
I think it starts with a 2.
It's like.
Look, I'm the one that I shared on the competition this week. The big cannon of corn that I've done. That's going to be my Earthshaker because it's bloody massive. It's nowhere near as big as the Forged one, but
it is. It's a brick,
but it is massive. But I think the community just needs to kind of have an answer to that and just say make it sensible. Stick on the big bones,
part of the reason GW haven't done it is because they're like, well, if you've got one, use it. And if you're proxying, we're not allowed to talk about that. So we're not going to tell you what size it should be.
That's it. And you're not going to turn up to a Nottingham event. You might find that the independent comps, people like Triple Crown and stuff, might come up with
they'll introduce
a suggested base size or a range of... Because Giants have 2 base sizes now, don't they?
Yeah, that's why I was disappointed, right? Because you saw other units that are like, Warriors of Chaos, Demonic Steed, where it's like 50 by 50 minimum, or maybe 50 by 75.
Yeah, exactly that.
Which is kind of cool. Because you can run it next to some Dragon Ogres, and it's got the same base size. That's kind of nice, or whatever. But I just wish they did that for this Earthshaker Dreadquake mortar, because mine is modeled around the look of, it's like halfway between a Hell Cannon and an Earthshaker, so the footprint is way small, and I think the base size that I have them on right now is, what is it? It's like, I want to say like 80 by 80 or something, but it's not as humongous as the Hell Cannon, but it's not quite as elongated as the Dreadquake mortar. So
yeah,
I'm thinking of that I should build a footprint for it to bring with me to Adepticon, just in case anyone's like, that's not a Siegequake mortar or whatever, and then I can just plunk down this crappy stupid base and put my guy on top of it and just say, well, here's the footprint, I guess.
I would say
if it'll make you happy, but
I would say like it's worth prompting that conversation, because tournament organizers have got so many things to be worried about that I think we have a responsibility to be ambassadors for our faction in that environment. And I do think your thinking just sounds totally legit, Xander. Like what you want to be doing is showing them a unit that's basically the same, that has a defined base size, like the Iron Demon, for instance, and saying, I'm just using the same base size as that,
Yeah. And all of this to say, There's lots of activity and excitement happening for the old world. So join the campaign that we're working on, Darkforged 2024. Show off your army, get some feedback. You'll have a place on the forum where your army blog can live forever. You can link to it from your Facebook, from your Instagram, from whatever. If you're more used to using Facebook or social media, it's nice to have a non-transient, permanent place where your army blog can live that you can link to, rather than making a post in a Facebook group
It just
where
gets lost, doesn't it?
people see it for a day or two, and then it just gets lost forever. So I think those are the advantages of still posting in forums. So I really encourage everyone to join the forum. If you're listening and you are not a part of it, maybe you're just on the Discord or something, join the forum and share some pictures. It's really easy to upload in the Discourse software that we use for the forum. And it's really easy to upload from your phone. Take pictures from your phone, upload from your phone. It's really simple. I recently upped the cap. We had like a cap of 5 images at a time to upload. I've blown that up to like 20 or something. So there shouldn't be any problem uploading pictures. Take as many pictures as you want. Upload it to your forum post, and get some feedback.
So yeah, absolutely. I think we all would suggest anyone who's trying to get into the old world or wants to get into collecting Chaos Dwarfs, a really, really good, a solid way of doing that, and a way of finding a community very, very quickly is getting involved in Chaos Dwarfs Online's Darkforged campaign. Old returners and new gamers alike. There is a question though that needs to be answered, which is, every one of the supported factions are going to be getting models for them. Of the unsupported factions, they have Age of Sigmar equivalents that are very easy to port over and use. Chaos Dwarfs are in a unique position where we are going to be one of the unsupported factions that isn't even remotely supported by a main line range of miniatures by Games Workshop. So unless we have classic miniatures in our collections already, or we're willing to trawl eBay and pay those prices, anything but goldfish blue, people, don't do it. We have to come up with options of our own, of how are we going to collect Chaos Dwarfs? How are we going to source and find miniatures? And I was hoping that tonight we could maybe share some ideas from us on the podcast. What are the ranges out there that people can tap into? What are the ranges people could use? Does anyone in particular want to kick off this discussion?
Sure, I'll start. So I think there's tons of ways you can go with, just if you want to stay official, right? If you want to use Games Workshop products and you want to go that way, there's still tons of options for you. I think the most recent fantasy dwarf models were like the Ironbreakers and the Longbeards. That kit is really nice. It's totally, you could totally convert from that. I think even the Caradron Overlords from AOS are really cool. They've got a lot of more technological looking aesthetics. So there's tons of stuff you can adapt from Games Workshop stuff. I think that's totally acceptable. And if you want to stay, tournament ready for a Games Workshop event, that's the way to go. The alternative, obviously, is these third-party miniatures. And one that I wanted to draw attention to, which I haven't checked out for years, but I've been looking up recently, is a range of dark dwarves from Mom Miniatures. And so I'll have a link in the show notes or whatever where you can check these out. But they've got a pretty decent little range that's got some really excellent looking dark dwarves that are kind of like a blend between the Legion of Asgore 8th edition looking aesthetic and also a little bit 3rd edition. They've got helmets and beards and big circle shields. And they've got centaur, bull centaurs. They've got a death rocket. They've got some really cool like golem looking guys. They've even got this they call their Chaos Sorcerers viziers. So they got a vizier, it's like a chariot being pulled by fiery looking bulls. And they've got a couple other sorcerer models. And it's just a really cool line of miniatures. And one of the problems, that we're seeing everywhere is that a bunch of these different unit types are out of stock. But they do have a notify when available. You can put your email address in there. And it would be really cool if we could all put in our email address in there, because I really want to get a unit of these dark dwarves. It's 26 pounds for a unit of 20 Chaos Dwarves. And it says it's on 20 mil bases, but maybe they're changed. Maybe I'll email them, see if they could change that. But just really cool. I've never seen a lot of them out in the wild painted, and I would love to see some support for this range. It's really cool, and I think it's a perfect fit for the old world.
Do you know what? I feel like it's a very cool range. It's a range I haven't really kind of seen represented out in the wild, as it were. I haven't seen them much on forums. I've definitely not seen them on tables, but I've seen them online. They do look awesome. They look very, very cool. Anyone else got any suggestions of Chaos Dwarf ranges that are currently available that people could tap into?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I do want to say, I'm pretty sure I have the Mom Mini's Vizier. I don't have the Chariot, but I think they have an on-foot variant as well.
Yeah, they have
really good pickup. Love
I have the
scope.
regiment, and I really recommend it as well, especially if you like Infernal Guard of the Tamakan era.
Yeah.
Yep.
Other than that, I would say old school minis is a great look. On the forum, we've had a lot of engagement with Jamie over at Old School Minis. He's sponsored a few of our contests in the past, and even some of our art contests have fed into his concept art mill and got cranked out by sculptors to be models there. I don't know if that's gone through the full casting release yet, but I know it was. We've seen the greens, so he's been a really great collaborator for the forum. I've been, let's see, I think I've been through 2 of his Kickstarters at this point, but I think most of his business model now will just be through his online store, which I've also ordered from and had really good experiences with. Right now, I'm working on a couple units of Boar Centaurs, which Zod will be very pleased with when I actually finish them. He's outpaced me on that by probably a year or 2 by the time I finish.
Zod outpaces us all, man.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, they're great sculpts, metal minis if that's your thing. Good range of Chaos Dwarf infantry, ranged close combat centaurs. Yeah, everything I've got from there has been.
I'm just checking them out now on their website. It looks like it's under Ewall de Vargar, if you're looking it up.
Yeah, and they also have some things in other. I'd encourage anybody to browse the rest of the site as well. For those into kind of different demonic creatures or anything, there's even some wastelands miniatures that are good pickups.
Yeah.
I have some snail riders. I've got a whale mutant that I'll use as kind of a base filler. He fits on about 2 40 mil bases, which is very fun. So I'd encourage anybody just to browse the whole site. You never know what you're going to find there. Lots of different kind of aesthetics and a general actually unified aesthetic of helms in the Chaos Dwarf section. So, take a look, and maybe we'll see more from Jamie on the forum. He does poke his head in from time to time.
Good, solid recommendation. Chits, what would you be recommending to listeners?
So you know me. Anyone who's listened to the old shows knows that I love a Hobgoblin, and I love a Hobgoblin of the classic style. So if you are looking for an affordable option in that range and something that looks 90s but doesn't cost the earth, then Maxmini, which is actually the mini design and sales arm of Troll Trader, which is a big used Warhammer Emporium, do these incredible bundle deals. So they have a Goblin army for £125 that ships for free globally. If you look at the aesthetic of it, they've all got the big tall hats that you would associate with a Hobgoblin. Now, there are some units in there, because obviously it's intended to be run against the green skin list. There's some units in the big bundle that you won't need. So you won't need the Wolf Chariots because they're not legal. You won't need the Shamans because they don't exist. But everyone knows that a Chaos Dwarf second army is going to be greenskins, so there's an advantage there. But to be exact, they do a unit of 2 bolt throwers for £15. They do a regiment of sneaky gits, which look exactly like classic sneaky gits for like £12 for 10. We're talking about like £1, £1.20 a mini, which is great. They have the classic hand weapon and bow options, obviously, for the infantry. And then if you want to expand it to a themed list, then you've got everything you need, but you've got both types of Wolf Rider, which means you can take them in the style that they're kind of intended to be used when you're using the Chaos Dwarf army. It's not an amazing range for Black Orcs. They have one Orc regiment. They are wearing armor, but it's like chainmail, so it's not perfect for that. But on the whole, yeah, if you want to solve all your Hobgoblin shopping needs in one place, then I recommend Maxmini for it. The units are called Goblin, by the way. They don't use the word Hobgoblin. They just call them Goblins.
Yeah, they're a range that I'm not massively familiar with the Goblin range of theirs, but they are a company that I've become increasingly aware of as a supplier of miniatures, and you can't kind of beat their value. Those army box sets they're a proper army in a box. It's not like a start collecting, it's like you've bought an army, isn't it?
Yeah, I was looking at their Tomb Kings one, and although it's missing a certain set of utility pieces, they really do like to give you one of everything. And then bundle it all together. And I think the truth is, since the vast majority of people are playing in non-GW environments, these minis are directly intended to be the unit roster of the old world or equivalent Warhammer Fantasy copies. And from that perspective, you've got your foot and mounted Khans covered. You've got all of the weapon options available on the Hobgoblins are covered by that range. And then when you're paying that little, realistically, the only thing that's cheaper is if you're already a printer.
Yeah, very good, very good. The ranges that I'd like to talk about today is mostly because I've been trying to, with this current project for the old world, do my Big Hat Army. The Big Hat Army I originally wanted to do for Age of Sigmar, but kind of fell by the wayside a tiny bit, kind of reinvigorate and bring that back, that idea of that Big Hat Army. And I love the original Big Hat Chaos Dwarf range, but as people, collectors will know, they're not the easiest models to kind of get hold of. I mean, there are ways, but they are not the easiest models to get hold of. However, there are 2 Chaos Dwarf online forum users who have really filled that space, as it were. So I'd like to talk about Fabozel, and I'd like to talk about Broniak. So Fabozel, a couple of years ago, started sharing sculpts on Thingiverse that he was creating of the original Big Hat warriors. I think he started off with a single warrior, and it was very, very heavily inspired by the Big Hats, to the point that when you stick a Fabozel model next to a Big Hat, it almost could be from the same range. Since then, he's had a Patreon, which has really, really grown in scope, that he now has almost every single unit from the Chaos Dwarf. Now, his units are a little bit more based on the Ravening Hordes list, the kind of White Dwarf Presents list. But almost every single model from that range kind of represented there, including things like the Lamassu and Sorcerers and all that kind of stuff. That Patreon, from what I understand, is starting to come to an end now. And Fabozel has very, very graciously said that he's going to be giving sculpts to the community once the project is finished. His Patreon is very much like an early bird. You pay a little bit of money to support the artist, and you get the models before general release. He also has tiers where people can be official sellers. So if you jump on Etsy and look up Chaos Dwarf, I guarantee within the first 10 items that come up, there'll be at least 4 or 5 of them will be his miniatures. And they're really, really, really cool, and they're really, really available. I don't own a resin 3D printer anymore, but I'm able to easily through Etsy buy these models at £1 or £2 each, and it's a really nice way to be able to build an army. More recently in our community, Broniak has been going down the same path that Fabozel started to tread a couple of years ago. He started off by sharing his kind of work in progress Chaos Dwarfs that he was creating through an early copy of our zine and on our Discord server. And that's now kind of grown into a life of its own and has spawned its own Patreon as well. And it's really nice now that we've got Broniak kind of treading the same path as Fabozel, which means we have double the sculpts for the same units. And I have in front of me right now a Broniak Chaos Dwarf Warrior and a Fabozel Chaos Dwarf Warrior. They look perfect. They can totally stand next to each other. And Broniak's got great humour in his models as well. Some of them are very cheeky and funny. He's got one which is the Chaos Dwarf Blunderer, whose blunderbuss has clearly backfired, and it's kind of exploded out like a Looney Tunes weapon. It's all sprayed open. He's sat down looking dizzy with his hat at a funny angle. Great fun stuff. You can have his little unit fillers and stuff to put in the units. But they're definitely 2 ranges that I'm going to be leaning on quite heavily to pad out the Games Workshop models I own. I own Games Workshop Big Hats, but not enough to run a 2,000 point army. So it's going to be great to be able to use those alongside some of my old Zonk models to kind of create an army that's quite cohesive. Although it's from 4 producers of models, quite a cohesive look overall. And I think they'd be the main ones I'd be recommending today.
Is it worth telling people what Zonk was and explaining to them how you can get Zonk now?
The saga that is Zonk. So quite a long time ago on the forum, a user appeared going by the name of Zonk, and he shared some metal big hats that he had sculpted, well, they were greens that he had sculpted, and they were in the vein of the big hats 1990s Chaos Dwarf miniatures. By today's standards, I would say the Zonk models are a bit rough around the edges. They are. I've literally just been painting some while we've been talking here, and I've got them next to some Fab LZs, and I can tell you they are a bit ropey in comparison. But you have to understand that this is in a time that this was happening, that was before 3D printing, that before there was widely available third-party Chaos Dwarf miniatures, and so he kind of really cornered the market there. However, what happened was he offered to sell these models to people on Chaos Dwarfs Online forum, and it turned out to be a scam. I think only the first handful of people who got the miniatures, first handful of people who ordered miniatures actually got them. The second wave sent this man the money, and then they never got their miniatures. And then he ended up kind of deleting his account and running sort of thing. And it turned out that it was a big scam, and a lot of people had lost money and stuff over it.
And he'd done the scam before, right, to Dark Elf forum or something.
From what we understand, yeah, he'd appeared on different forums. It was kind of a thing that he was doing at the time, turning up to forums, sculpting these models and buggering off sort of thing. But then what happened was a handful of Chaos Dwarf Online forum users who will go unnamed, although they are absolute heroes in our community, will go unnamed because it's a murky grey area when you're ripping off a rip-off merchant. I'm not quite sure where that lands. They took some of his models and they recast them in metal, and they were then renamed the Karma is a Bitch, kind of like as a one big Chaos Dwarfy looking word, Karma is a Bitch Dwarfs, where they were then re-released for the community. That's how I got my first Zonks in metal. Would have been very soon after joining the forum. I was put into contact with the user who was able to get me Karma Dwarfs, and I picked up a unit of 10 Karma Dwarf blunderbusses. But the saga continues. So if you look up Zonk Chaos Dwarfs, there are now 3 STLs of those dwarfs available to be downloaded and printed. So now half of my Zonks are metals, and half of my Zonks are resin prints. And I can tell you now, because I've got a metal one that I've painted tonight and a resin one that I've painted tonight, the differences between them are barely imperceptible. Are barely perceptible. You might find it's a tiny bit softer depending on the quality of your printer and stuff, but they'll look absolutely great. I've definitely passed a 3-foot test.
I was going to say table distance. Yeah. Well, I think it's important. I think it's important because you can get them for free, right? And that's the key thing. Like Brauniac, there is a modest fee, and I think he will probably keep it that way. But you can talk to him. He's very open on Discord and on Discourse, and you can interact with him quite happily. Marco is a public member of the community. There's even a Patreon tier where you can ask him to sculpt something specifically for you.
Well, I was saying quite often Marco Brauniac will do sculpting on Discord. So occasionally he'll log on Discord and go, I'm sculpting some dwarfs tonight. Does anyone want to watch? And he'll have the users log on and watch him sculpt these things from scratch, which is always a fascinating process to watch.
It is, but it makes the 90s very affordable, because if let's say you have a handful of original 90s sculpts that you got off the internet, fine, right? But you can't repeat those 10 times. If you combine those 3 sources of STLs, then you can have something that looks uniform but has a lot of variety in it. And I guess that's the army that you're building on your blog now, Jack, right?
Just going to say, if you want to know what that looks like in the flesh, guys, go on Chaos Dwarfs Online, look up Oxymandias for Mad, and you will see literally that project being played up.
Bravo. Well, that's 4 good options.
It is, and I think we're a really good position now as a community where there are still DIY options available to create Chaos Dwarf army, but likewise we are actually spoiled for choice as to how you can create Chaos Dwarfs now. When we look back at when the forum was created, 2007, I don't know if you know this, Xander, we often refer to it as the Battle for Skull Pass days.
That's totally
Yeah.
what it was, yeah.
So when we look back at the Battle for Skull Pass days, DIY was the main route of doing this. And that's still a fantastic route and a well-trod path, but it doesn't have to be anymore. There are so many different ways for people to get into Chaos Dwarfs, to start collecting Chaos Dwarfs, and there's never been a better time to do it. Now, as Xander points out, we're on equal footing. We're just as maligned as Lizardmen and Skaven now. Everyone's been dragged down to our level.
Or we've been elevated somewhat too. If you compare our PDF list that we have now versus the PDF list that was released with Ravening Hordes in 6th edition, it's not even a comparison. It feels like a complete codex.
Absolutely,
you've got all of the, you got the lore text on the side of each unit. You've got all the options you could wish for. You've got a full, lore of Hashut, and you got all the magic items, and it looks like any other army out there. So I think, like you said, we're really on an equal footing, and it's awesome.
Time to do it. So, boys and girls, the best place to get involved in all of this, to get involved in the Darkforged campaign, to get involved in starting a blog, to get involved in getting inspired by Chaos Dwarf miniatures, Chaos Dwarf fan art, Chaos Dwarf lore, narrative, all of those sorts of things. The place to do that is Chaos Dwarfs Online. So look us up, Google us, Chaos Dwarfs Online. You'll find our discourse forum. The discourse forum is the real beating heart of our community, where you will find our blogs and you will find our legacy of content going all the way back to 2007. And for more kind of up-to-date and chit-chat sort of things, we also have a Discord server as well, which you'll find linked on our website on Chaos Dwarfs. So, yeah, look us up, and we hope to see you there.
Well, I mean, I'll also say that, we're also on Instagram, if Instagram's your thing. I know Instagram's been a big part of my hobby for like the last 5 or 6 years. So we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. We're trying to, coalesce around the forum for sure, but we're on all these other platforms. And we're also doing weekly hobby hangouts now. We're trying to organize this for Wednesday. We just had our 3rd week, which was on Wednesday this week. And we're just hanging out on Wednesday nights. It's typically around 8 p.m. in the Americas for Eastern time, and I think they're also trying to set up a Central European 8 p.m. slot as well with Jasco. But yeah, on Wednesday, see if you can book some time on Wednesday and just come and hang out, do some miniature stuff. You don't have to be on camera. You don't even have to say that much. But if you want to just hang out and listen to the chat while you do some miniatures, that would be awesome. And it's a great place to share what you're doing for Darkforged 2024. And just, if you want some feedback, real-time feedback on your miniatures or painting or anything, I'm dedicating myself to being there Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern for the foreseeable future. I've got it scheduled in my calendar. I've told my wife about it.
It's the important thing, mate.
All the normal things you do. And, I'm going to be working because I've been doing so much hobby lately that I figured I would just set aside one night a week where I can be sure that I can engage with other people. So really want to plug that right there. But aside from that, yeah, it's just a great time to do Chaos Dwarf stuff.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, we'll say good night. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you all soon, we hope, on our next podcast. Ta-ra.